Welcome everybody. So that's my talk today, which is widely used on the work I was doing with my students at the Royal College of Art. You will very shortly get to know them. So as you can see, it's quite important. So this was a collaboration between Royal College of Art and Kyushu University. So they had to stay in Fukuoka for some time, and they were collaborating with Fukuoka Zoo and a second zoo there at this location. So this is what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing is basically giving a short introduction, what they are doing, and the students will have a few words with you. Then the next thing is, so what kind of research was done in the context of workshops in Fukuoka. And then we will talk about the interesting part in terms of VR visualization. And already an announcement, so for those of you who did not see me during the demo session, so I will set up a demo there. So after the whole session is over, I'm happy to basically give you a short demo, which actually just takes 5 minutes. And then finally, a few more words about the research trajectory. So these are the students which were working with me on this project. So it was widely based on their idea and their initiative, and based on some work I was previously doing. So I was talking at this conference about some of this work before. I will not. So if you're interested in this, what I, for example, did at Kyushu University, I'm happy to talk about this at a later point. So, but we have here now a short introduction of my students.
Hi, I'm Tori Simpson. I have a background in social science and data science, and I'm currently studying the Global Innovation Design Programme at Imperial College London and the Royal College of Art. My work looks at designing for social good and instilling collaborative communication between stakeholders through design.
My name's Harry Hosker. I have a background in biomedical engineering and I'm studying innovation design engineering, similarly at the Imperial College and Royal College of Art. My work focuses mainly on conservation and innovative technologies within the sector. We came together to look at how designers might better consider animals whilst working and designing towards a more sustainable and equitable future.
This work has taken us to Kyushu, Japan, where we worked with a lot of different collaborators, and we're also continuing it now at the RCA. We're particularly interested in examining how emerging technologies can enhance our research and impact. Bjorn is about to show you all of our work. Thank you so much in advance for listening. But before you hear all about it, we'd like to show you a few clips from the workshops we conducted in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are basically the workshops they conducted in Japan. I will say a few more words about this later on. So this is basically the starting point of the research I want to talk about today. And why were we actually doing this? So the idea is basically to understand avian species, also from a conservation perspectives. So, and what my students together with my collaboration partners in Fukuoka were doing there was basically establishing a couple of workshops which were looking into how can we actually look into the potential ways of future communication between animal and birds. So the approach which we're following there is an approach which we had partly called speculative design. So it's basically projecting into the future. So how could we actually kind of develop a future in which birds in this case, but also in a general case, basically animals can communicate with humans. So what is the approach of this? So first of all, what we were thinking about, how can we shift perspectives? So this is something also, if you would take part in the demo, what you can basically experience. So, and shifting perspectives means here that basically we try to elaborate a culture where people actually think about, so what, from a perspective of a bird, how is it actually to explore the world. Then co-design, So co-design is one thing which is becoming more and more popular. I'm pretty sure that 50% of the people here in the room wrote already about this. So co-design normally is about engagement. So what we often do, for example, in work which I did, for example, together with Westminster City Council, or for example with GSK, Haleon, for example. So this is in a professional context, is co-design workshops, and what is normally then important is how can you actually integrate the stakeholders into a design process, and also at early on stages of a project, how can you integrate them into decision-making processes. And it's kind of different from what you normally know from software design, where you basically come up with a quite well-defined brief, which comes then with a couple of points, which are predefined by the customer, and then you basically work through this brief and come up with a final product and present it to the customer in the end. So you have much more touch points than in this case, and basically try to integrate people in decision-making processes. So, and of course, the other thing what we wanted to do is to integrate virtual reality technologies in this context. So this is where this is located in the space. So on one hand, we have this art-based methods, which are basically applying here. Then we have this post-human-centered design. Probably many of you heard already about human-centered design, which is normally taking the human into the center, and this was very popular in the last 10 years. So there are, for example, large agencies like IDEO, which are quite popular, especially in the advertisement community, which are following this human-centered design. But the problem is, of course, when we are just centering at the human, right, from a sustainable perspective, we know that we come up with a lot of trouble. So this is basically about broadening the view. And the other thing is design futures, so basically using design as a vehicle to create futuristic approaches, which are not just looking 5 years in the future, but 10, 20, 30, 50 years into the future. So, and what we tried to do with this Avian project was actually then shift the perspective from human to mouse animals. So, and this was what the students did, Harry and Tori, when they were in Fukuoka. So they started basically the whole process with free sketches, which were more like a warming up practice, which all the participants basically draw. So you saw some of the videos in the beginning. So they had around 10, 15 participants per workshops, which were partly researchers, partly it were also, of course, students, PhD students, master students, which were involved in that, but also people then from zoos. We will see a few pictures about this later on. So and then the main activity was actually first, draw your most memorable interaction with a bird. I will show some examples afterwards. Then second, draw the same interaction from the perspective of the bird. So that's basically then the perspective shift. And third and finally is then draw the same interaction of you optimized in a way that you have a positive feedback between the human and the animal. So here in this case the bird. So 50 years into the future projected. So and here we have an example. So this, for example, you see that somebody interacted with a bird in terms of that this particular bird was landing on the hand. And then we have the perspective shift, basically number 2, what you see here. So that basically, obviously, from the perspective of the bird, how this bird is looking at you. And then the third one is actually then thinking 50 years into the future, that you basically kind of have a good time together with the birds and basically sharing your free time activities, like you can see here in this nice picture. So this is one of these drawings. So this were, again, some pictures of the workshops which were taking place. So the first one was with Fukuoka Zoo, where you can basically see where they made these different drawing exercises. The second one was in Omuta, so with the Omuta Zoo, which is also in close proximity to Fukuoka. I'm not sure, so how many of you have been here in Fukuoka? Because it's, yeah. So it's often, it's a very, very huge city, and I think it's kind of a birthplace for Japan, because what I learned about it's a large harbor city, and basically this was a starting point where all basically the different cultures immersed or basically came into the Japanese country and then started to populate the country. So a very interesting history behind it, and it's a very large city actually. But yeah, so it's in Germany it's also not so well known. So Yeah, so they have a very strong design community there and a very strong design faculty. So, and what I want to talk about in the next stage is basically what is now the base for what you could also see here in the demo later on. So these are the three perspectives. So as first, this was the interaction with the bird. This particular person can remember who basically drew it. So and the interaction was probably to 30% of the people here in the room the same happened. So basically what happened was that the bird was stealing the sandwich. Then the second one, perspective shift, so having a look at the people who are basically missing their sandwich very much now and are obviously not so happy about it. And then the third one is then basically into the future, instead of just basically grabbing your sandwich and getting away. There should be some positive feedback from the animal. It's actually quite interesting that here the animal has to make the first step actually, so but yeah. So, but this was the base for the visualization which we wanted to do. So, and what was the next step? So basically, we had the drawn scene from the workshop participants, and now we created a virtual environment. So, and why did we do this? So the simple idea is basically that in a very, very, very close future, so probably just a few months from now, instead of basically using this very manual drawings, you just put a few prompts right into an AI-generated system, and then you have your virtual environment. And what we basically want to find out now, what our research question is in this context is now, in the future, would you still prefer to have just this normal drawings, right? Or if you can just invest with this, so with the same time investment, if you can have a full virtual experience and you can be fully immersed in this, would you prefer that? And that's something we basically want to elaborate here. So, and for this purpose, we generated an environment with Blender. A few models were, of course, also downloaded, a few animations of the birds. Also, I have to say in this context that the students, they are not computer science students, so they are design students. They are not extremely good in coding. So, and with a couple of hours investment, basically, they can set up already this really nice environments. So basically, we created this virtual reality-based environment by using a Meta Quest or Oculus Quest 2. And then we started to collect user feedback. Actually, also we started to collect here user feedback. So if you want to see the demo later on, it would be super if you could leave some feedback here. So what do we want to do? So basically, we first created this virtual environment, the first version. I will show a few screenshots of that. We got some first qualitative feedback in London from that. And then the second version is what I can show here, actually. And what we want to do after we collected here, qualitative and quantitative feedback, that we have then another deep dive data collection workshop in London. So these are basically the visualizations. This was the first version of the VR visualizations which we did with a nice penguin, which is probably not exactly the bird which was in the original drawing, but yeah, that was our first prototype. So here you can see Mo is escaping with the sandwich from the other perspective, yeah, and basically returning a flower. So that was the initial one. So, and this here is now the final rendering, which hopefully I can play if I, yeah, come on. So that's Unreal Engine 5, as you probably, if you use, so who's using Unreal Engine here? A little bit, yeah, I know you are more on the Unity side of things, so yeah, anybody else? But are you use Unity, or? Yeah. So maybe the main reason why we are choosing Unreal Engine is because from a visual quality perspective, it's much easier to create really impressive environments. If you compare this to Unity, you need to put much more work into it, actually. So you basically saw this 3 different renderings now, but so if you're interested in this, I can show you this there by using the Oculus Quest. I will set it up, so after the session, just feel free to join if you are interested. So this is now the final steps. So basically, we will collect this preliminary quantitative feedback to find out if people are interested that or basically support our opinion that this might be a very valuable approach in the future. So, and here you can see already we had a couple of people testing this. So we got 11 responses so far. And it's probably not so surprising that here, of course, most of the audience are really interested in this approach. So here, for example, was a question to which extent the scenario might help you to imagine the bird's perspective. So I will go quickly through that. You can see that it's here widely in the positive area. Here was the question, at any point did you feel yourself become so involved that you were unaware so that you had the feeling that you are in this kind of somebody else drawing and of an interaction with the bird. So that's here interesting because it's more mixed, right? So that some people say they have actually this feeling. Some people basically say it's not so super immersive in terms of that. Well, I would say a few more words about this later on. To what extent did you feel motivated to immerse yourself? So obviously many people were interested in this. Also here the immersion factor was quite good. And so that's the overall immersion measurement. So overall, you can see it's quite positive. Here you can see that the final question was, would you basically prefer in the future to have this kind of immersive representation of a scenario, or would you prefer to have your manual drawings? So this is blue actually. You can see that one person said, I prefer still the traditional drawings. One person said, yeah, whatever. So both is fine. But it's not a big surprise because we have here, of course, an audience who loves virtual reality. So we actually will also have to test it with a more critical audience. Interesting is the feedback. So one of the anonymous people who gave feedback actually gave here very good feedback in terms of, so if you're in one of the scenes with the bird, it's actually moving up and down and flapping. So, and the feedback was then in this context, do you want to, yeah. Okay. So in this context was basically that birds normally have a very stable head position. So normally this flapping, you would not really experience it like that. So that's quite interesting to think about it. So because if you are in this perspective from the bird, you have this feeling that you move up and down. So yeah, so that's obviously something we can probably improve. So actually another critical point was that we had still a bird in the scene. When you're in the bird perspective, maybe we have to remove that. So finally, future work, I mentioned it already. So what we want to do is basically to explore if this approach makes sense in the context of, in the future, you have a co-design workshop instead of just having manual drawings. You can directly use virtual reality technologies to basically integrate people, and is it a better way to motivate this kind of perspective shift in virtual reality? And what we are doing now, we will propose the workshop at the Design Research Society conference, which will be in Boston. So this will be one of a couple of workshops in this context where we basically explore this idea of perspective shift. Great, that's the end. Thanks a lot for your for listening to this talk. And these are our collaboration partners from Kyushu. So Jazz, Melanie, and Tokoshi. So thanks a lot to them as well. Thank you for your attendance.
Let's give a good round of applause. And let's open the floor to questions.